This is the third installment of part one of the lecture History of Religion in China. Where we left off was discussing the very first passage of the Tao Te Ching. The idea is that when we seek to understand the world and assign names to it, we distance ourselves from the world. We mediate the world with our concepts. According to Taoists, our attempts to understand the world this way leads us away from authentically understanding through experience what's happening. In order to get directly to Tao, in order to merge with Tao, we shouldn't seek to describe all the ways that it is. We shouldn't seek to give it a name. Naming has this element of control. When you understand something completely, then you have the ability to control it. And a way that this control happens is described in Tao Te Ching chapter 2. As soon as everyone in the world knows that the beautiful are beautiful, there is already ugliness. As soon as everyone knows the able, there is ineptness. This control that I was talking about allows us to create these distinctions between things. Once we designate something beautiful, we automatically designate something else as not beautiful, as ugly. These distinctions create dichotomies, they create opposites. And generally, when we make a distinction, it's in order to designate one of them valuable. One of the objects valuable. The beautiful object is valuable, the ugly object is not. The able person is valuable, the inept person is not. These distinctions lead directly to harm. They divide up, according to Taoists, what need not be divided. Tao itself is undifferentiated. It's a primordium. It's a complete whole that includes the beautiful and the ugly and the able and the inept without the need to make the distinction. Once we make distinctions, we create value, and this value creates contentiousness, competition. According to Taoists, this is not natural for humans. This is the reason that humans are unhappy, that humans are unhealthy, that humans are unsatisfied. Our very attempts to understand the world create contentiousness, create value. So if we undo this proclivity, right, this tendency that we have to make these sorts of judgments, then not only can we understand the world better, we can lead more authentic lives. According to Taoists, there is a pattern and rhythm to how things emerge and then dissipate. Reality itself is shaped by the coming into existence and eventual disappearance of all things. The Taoist would instruct one to not become too connected, right? Not to value or to treasure one state over another state. If change will eventually undo everything as the way it is now, if we become attached to a certain way that things are, then we'll only eventually be disappointed. The way of things is that youth leads to old age, life leads to death. Light eventually always transforms into darkness, and our understanding of the world should be just as fluid. Also, everything has its place in the cosmos. Everything has its own particular natural way of being that is perfectly well suited to it. And all of these different beings and the way that they naturally are, which in Chinese is called ziran, contribute to the ultimate and best functioning of the world. If everything is allowed to naturally express itself along as it exists inside and along with the changes that shape the world, then the world can reach its most synergistic, its most mutually beneficial state if everything is allowed to express itself in this way. The sage, here's another depiction of Lao Tzu communing with nature. understands the way things change and take shape. That's what sagely knowledge is all about. Understanding deeply the changes and what they bring leads to an understanding of Tao, whatever it is, itself. Sages, using this understanding, can efficiently and effectively put themselves in a position to help Tao along, we could say, to create the circumstances in which all things could benefit. You can think of it as, if you know the changes as they're happening right now, you have a glimpse into the future, how the present is pulling the future out of the not yet, out of the darkness, the opacity of the future that we can't foretell, right? This the future emerges. This is a principle of Tao. Tao constantly is coming right at us out of a future we can't understand. The sage can penetrate a little further into the future and understand how things are taking shape right as they begin to form and place themselves in a way that seems effortless. If you don't understand what the sage is doing, it may seem like they're not doing anything, but it's because their actions are so merged with Tao, so in tune with the way that things are, that they don't seem to ever have to try. This is an important concept in Taoism called Wu Wei, which would literally mean doing nothing. But the sage is never doing nothing. It just seems that way because of the ease with which they move, because of their attunement with Tao and their ability to be, well, at the right place at the right time. A central feature of this belief in Wu Wei is that humans experience strife and worry and anxiety because they struggle so much against the way that things naturally are. We struggle to make a name for ourselves. We struggle to learn hard lessons and work really hard because we think that should pay off in the end. But there's a way in which it only leads to our own unhappiness, that eventually we have to realize that the struggle isn't always worth it, that the goal should be ease. The goal should be an understanding that allows us to move freely through the world without feeling like things are against us. To that end, the Taoists ask us to forget what we learn, forget all the distinctions, forget the values, and see what's left after we're done forgetting. The thought is that would be the most natural expression of our human selves when we undo all the constructs that we've allowed to confine what we might truly be. Another feature of Taoism is the play of power and weakness, which we might transmute into the power in weakness. Here are two examples. The first is the idea that the most potent strength is the strength that's not used. This sounds like a martial arts tenet, but think of it as, think of a snake, think of a cobra. Ugh, scary. Think of a cobra right as it's about to strike. All right, so it's picked out its target, and it's just in the few moments before it strikes. The Taoist would point out that this is when it's at its most powerful. It's not once it's already began its strike. The minute it begins to move, it's already losing strength. It's already expending energy. Right when it's at its most potent is when it's at its strongest. But this is also when it's at its most vulnerable. The the focus of a cobra on its target means that something could happen behind it, something could happen beneath it, right? The idea is that when it's at its most potent, it's also at its most vulnerable. That's the time when another strike from another creature potentially could undermine the strength of the cobra. The most potent strength is the strength that's not yet used. It's when it's all stored up. This also has meaning in, if we think about the potency, the strength of the world, right? It's a weird thing to say, but as things emerge, right, as things are just coming into being, is when they're at their most vivid, right? Right when things begin to happen. is when anything is possible, right? Right when you are about to start a project is when you're at your best, before you start expending energy actually doing it. Taoists seek to, let's focus our awareness on the tenuous, the just about to be, the just about to be expended, the just about to be used, because this is where the strength of the world lies. Another example, a common example from the Tao Te Ching, is water. Water is the most accommodating, the softest, most flexible, the least threatening thing. If you think about it, like you can punch it and nothing will happen. It will take the shape of your hand. You can jump into it, well, at least not from very high up, and it'll accommodate your whole body. And it nurtures all things. The river that flows below in the valley is, in a sense, the most powerful aspect, but it's what feeds everything and nurtures everything. In a way, water can be said to be the mother of all things. Without it, nothing could be born. But water can also destroy. The pounding of waves on the rocks of the shore eventually creates sand, or pounding on the corals, rather. Well, depends on where it crashes, I guess. And the flowing of a river eventually erodes the rock. So, water, even though it could be said to be the softest thing, at the same time is the hardest. There's power in its weakness. Another passage from the Tao Te Ching, passage 55. The one who expresses the highest vitality can be compared to a newborn baby. Wasps and scorpions will not sting a baby. Snakes and vipers will not bite her. The birds of prey and ferocious beasts will not snatch him up. Though her bones are soft and her sinews supple, her grip is firm. Those of you who've been around babies know that they're soft, they're vulnerable, they're utterly defenseless, and then they get a hold of your hair and they're not letting go. There's this metaphor that all the potential of the whole human lies in a baby, in a small baby, and it is by virtue of that vulnerableness, that utter lack of threatening, that there has been no expenditure of power yet. That makes a baby the most powerful aspect, the most powerful part of being human, the thing that is most vital, the thing that is most full of potential. In Taoist religion, there is a very familiar appeal to making yourself into a baby, or actually through alchemy, through bodily alchemy, cultivating a baby inside of you, trying to recapture all of the energy that you've lost as you've lived your life to achieve the full vital state of what it is to be a newborn baby. And once you've embraced the potential toward this sort of strength and vitality that a baby has, that the snake has right before it bites, that the future has right before it becomes the present, you can actually begin to change your body. And according to some Taoist texts, you can merge so completely with the changes. You can achieve such full vitality that not only can you fly, as this sage here, Lietza, can, you can become as immortal as Tao itself. Next, we'll talk about some features of Taoist religion as it emerged out of the Tao Te Ching. The first feature of Taoist religion that we find consistently throughout most of China's long history is the yearning to extend life and become immortal. And it's important to note that the Chinese sense of immortal isn't like a person who's incapable of dying. It's a person who's able to extend their life so that their body processes help to preserve them. So you just continue getting older and older and older, but your body is able to actually prevent deterioration. And it's said that this would be the harmonizing with the very energies of Tao, so that you don't have to expend any more vitality and energy to prolong your life. We'll continue in the next video.